I finally got my dream seat in first class. Seat 1A, but just as boarding began, a man in a suit walked up, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "Give me your seat." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. What happened next had the entire airport gasping and laughing when the gate agent announced, "Escort the pilot." The airport buzzed with the usual chaos, rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps, muffled announcements echoing through the terminal. But I wasn't stressed. In fact, I felt lighter than I had in months. In my hand, I held something I had been dreaming of for a long time, a boarding pass for Seat 1A First Class. It wasn't just any seat. It represented patience, planning, and countless nights of saying no to things I wanted, just so I could save enough miles and points for this one moment. To some people, it was just a seat. To me, it was a small victory. I looked down at the glossy ticket and smiled. I could already imagine it, sinking into a wide leather seat, sipping a welcome drink before takeoff, stretching out my legs without worrying about cramped knees or someone reclining into my space. This wasn't just about luxury. It was about experiencing something I'd always seen from a distance. Every time I'd walked past first class before, I'd glance enviously at those calm, collected passengers while I shuffled toward the back of the plane, squeezed between strangers, hoping my seatbelt wasn't broken. But today was different. Today, I was one of them. As the gate agent scanned the first group of passengers, I found a spot by the window to wait. Outside, the plane gleamed under the sun, its nose pointed upward like it was daring the sky to hold it back. I thought about the long flight ahead, how, for once, the journey itself would be the highlight, not just the destination. My chest swelled with pride. It felt like I had climbed a mountain and was now standing at the peak, enjoying the view. The excitement wasn't only about comfort. It was about what the seat represented. For months, I had worked long shifts, skipped vacations, and saved every spare dollar. Friends had teased me for being as cheap as too focused, but I knew what I wanted. This wasn't an accident. It was intentional. And holding that boarding pass in my hand felt like holding a trophy. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder and straightened my shirt. A part of me wondered if I'd look like I belonged in first class, or if everyone would know I was new to this world. But then another thought struck me. Oh, cared. I had earned this moment. Every hour of hard work, every night of resisting impulse purchases, every mile collected, it all led to now. The announcement over the speaker crackled. "We will begin boarding shortly." I could almost hear the leather seat calling my name. I took a deep breath, soaking in the atmosphere. For the first time, an airport didn't feel like a place of rushing and stress. It felt like the gateway to something special. Little did I know, the boarding pass in my hand wasn't just opening the door to first class. It was about to open the door to an encounter I could never have imagined. One that would turn this perfect day into a story people would laugh about for years. Just as the announcement finished and people began gathering in front of the gate, I felt a shadow fall over me. I turned and saw a tall man in a perfectly pressed navy suit, polished shoes that clicked on the tiled floor, and an expression that screamed entitlement. Wait, he wasn't smiling. At least not the kind of smile meant to be friendly. It was the kind of smirk people wear when they already believe the answer will go their way. His eyes dropped to the boarding pass in my hand, then flicked back up to meet mine. And without a greeting, without even a hint of hesitation, he said, "I'll need to give me your seat." At first, I thought he was joking. People sometimes tease strangers in airports, trying to break the monotony of waiting, so I chuckled lightly and replied, "A good one." But his face didn't change. If anything, his smirk deepened. "I'm serious," he said, folding his arms across his chest. That seat, one, it should be mine." Confusion rushed through me. "Excuse me?" I asked, tightening my grip on the ticket. "This is my boarding pass. I paid for this with my miles." He tilted his chin up slightly, as if he were addressing a subordinate rather than another passenger. "I'm the president of our HOA," he declared, his voice carrying just enough volume for people nearby to hear. "In my community, when I ask for something, people don't argue. They respect me, and I expect you to show the same courtesy." My mind raced, trying to process what I was hearing. Around us, travelers began pausing mid-conversation, eyes darting toward the growing tension. Some leaned closer, pretending to scroll on their phones while eavesdropping. I felt the weight of their stares as though they were silently waiting for me to cave. Yes, sir, I'm sorry, but this is my seat. I've been planning this for months. I can't just hand it over." His smirk faltered for the first time. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. He stepped closer, lowering his voice but sharpening the edge in his words. "Listen, I don't sit in economy. Ever. You look like someone who belongs back there, not in first class. You'll be more comfortable if you just switch." The insult burned, but I stood my ground. "No," I said clearly, refusing to lower my gaze. The man's jaw tightened. With a dramatic sigh, he turned toward the gate agent and waved a dismissive hand in my direction. "Excuse me," he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This passenger is refusing to give up a seat that should be mine. You need to do something about it." The entire waiting area seemed to hold its breath. Phones tilted ever so slightly, as though people were ready to record if this confrontation escalated. My pulse quickened. The man's arrogance wasn't just irritating. It was intimidating. And in that tense moment, one question hung in the air. Would the gate agent side with him, or with me? The gate agent, a woman in her mid-30s with sharp eyes and the kind of calm demeanor that comes from dealing with hundreds of impatient travelers every day, looked up from her computer. She scanned the man, then me, then the boarding pass still clutched tightly in my hand. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. It felt like the entire waiting area had frozen just to witness what would happen next. The man in the suit stepped forward with the authority of someone used to winning arguments before they even began. "This seat mix-up needs to be corrected immediately," he said, his voice dripping with entitlement. "I don't fly coach. That seat is mine. Fix it. Hooch." The agent raised a brow, unimpressed but professional. "Sir, do you have a boarding pass for 1A? He let out a short laugh, as though the question itself was beneath him. "Not yet, but I should. You don't understand who I am. I'm the president of my HOA, FOTSE. People know me. People respect me. I always sit in first class. Always." A ripple of muffled laughter spread through the waiting area, quickly stifled. Some passengers tried to hide their grins behind their phones, while others exchanged raised eyebrows. The gate agent, however, didn't flinch. She glanced at me. "And you?" I extended my boarding pass. Hand steady, though my heart raced. She examined it, nodded, and returned it. "And this is a valid ticket for seat 1A, she confirmed. The man's jaw clenched. "You don't understand? That seat isn't his. It's mine by right. He doesn't belong there." "I do. Move him." It was no longer just a dispute, it was a full-blown performance, one he seemed determined to win. His voice was rising, drawing more attention. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Mom, why is that man yelling?" The mother shushed him, but her eyes remained locked on the scene. I could feel every stare on me like a spotlight I hadn't asked for. My palms itched, but I refused to back down. "I'm not moving," I said firmly, keeping my tone calm but resolute. "This is my seat. I earned it." The man scoffed, shaking his head as though I were a stubborn child. "You're making a mistake. I'll have you removed if I have to." He jabbed a finger toward the agent. "Call security. Do it now." The agent's expression didn't waver. She picked up the intercom microphone, her hand steady and deliberate. My pulse quickened. Around us, the crowd leaned forward in anticipation, hungry for the next moment in this unscripted drama. The man adjusted his tie and straightened his posture, clearly convinced the announcement would tip the scales in his favor. I gripped my ticket tighter, my stomach nodding. In that suspended second, every sound seemed amplified. The crackle of the speaker, the shuffle of shoes, the faint hum of airport machinery. Then the agent pressed the button. Her voice rang out across the terminal, clear and commanding. "Attention passengers, please make way. Escort the pilot." The words echoed through the terminal. Escort the pilot. For a split second, silence blanketed the gate area as though the entire room had collectively stopped breathing. Then, like a wave crashing against rocks, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Dull. People turned to one another, confusion flickering across their faces. I froze, staring at the gate agent. Surely she hadn't meant him. My eyes darted to the man in the navy suit. His smirk returned, but this time it wasn't arrogance. It was something sharper, more calculated. With a slow, deliberate movement, he reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a small black case. When he flipped it open, a silver pilot's badge glinted under the fluorescent airport lights. The entire waiting area gasped in unison. Phones went up instantly, screens flashing as people recorded the scene. A teenager in the corner whispered, "No way. He's the pilot." His friend elbowed him, whispering back, "A dude. We almost booed him out of here." The suited man snapped the case shut and slipped it back into his bag with the ease of someone who had done this countless times before. His stride changed, shoulders squaring, posture straightening into a quiet authority that no longer looked like arrogance, but command. See. The same passengers who had snickered moments ago were now gawking in stunned silence, trying to reconcile the image of the entitled HOA president with the reality of the man about to fly their plane. The gate agent extended an arm and he moved forward with her, his shoes clicking against the floor like a metronome. Every step he took seemed to echo louder than the last, the kind of sound that settles into people's bones. I stood frozen, my mind reeling. Just minutes ago, he demanded my seat with a tone that screamed superiority. Now, the realization hit, this wasn't just a man trying to bully me out of comfort. This was the one person every passenger on that plane would be entrusting their lives to. The irony was almost too much to process. The crowd, which had been seconds away from siding with me completely, now looked torn, unsure whether to laugh, cheer, or question how their pilot had just made a scene in front of them. A woman near the window muttered, "Well, that's one way to make an entrance." As he passed me, his eyes flicked sideways, locking onto mine. For just a heartbeat, the smirk returned, softer this time, almost amused. I couldn't tell if it was a silent "I told you so" or a quiet acknowledgement that he had played the situation to perfection. Either way, the message was clear. He wasn't just anyone. The terminal buzzed again, a strange mix of awe, disbelief, and nervous laughter. Someone clapped awkwardly at first, then stopped as others failed to join in. The atmosphere hovered in that fragile balance between tension and hilarity. I tightened my grip on my boarding pass, my heart thudding against my ribs. One thing was certain, no matter how comfortable seat one had turned out to be, this flight was already unforgettable. As the man strode toward the jet bridge beside the gate agent, the crowd gradually erupted into laughter. It wasn't the cruel kind of laughter. It was the disbelieving, relieved, almost giddy kind that comes when tension dissolves into absurdity. Passengers shook their heads, whispering to each other, "The HOA president was the pilot all along." Someone in the back even muttered, "That was straight out of a sitcom." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My heart was still pounding, but now for a different reason. The shock of the reveal replayed in my mind like a scene from a movie. His smug demand, the agent's perfectly timed announcement, the glint of the pilot's badge, all the pieces clicked together and the ridiculousness of it hit me full force. Sliding my boarding pass back into my pocket, I followed the other first-class passengers down the jet bridge. For the first time in years of flying, I wasn't the one sneaking glances at the elite travelers up front. This time, I belonged here. But as I walked, I couldn't help but wonder, what kind of flight would this be, knowing the man who had tried to bulldoze me out of my seat was the one flying the plane? The moment I stepped into the cabin, the difference was intoxicating. Wide leather seats, the faint scent of champagne already poured, and the kind of quiet that didn't exist in coach. I slid into seat 1A, my seat, and let myself sink into the cushions with a smile that spread uncontrollably across my face. Around me, whispers still traveled through the cabin. A man in 2C leaned over to his wife and chuckled, "I hope he's a better pilot than negotiator." She stifled a laugh, covering her mouth with her boarding pass. I couldn't help but join in. For all his bluster, all his arrogance, the so-called HOA president had ended up proving his authority in a way no one expected. Not by forcing me out of my seat, but by revealing he was the very person responsible for flying the plane safely to its destination. Oh, a flight attendant stopped by with a glass of sparkling water and a knowing smile. Quite an entrance, wasn't it?" she whispered, as though she had seen this kind of drama unfold more times than she could count. I raised my glass slightly in a silent toast, grinning, grinning. As the engines roared to life and the plane began to taxi, I leaned back and let the absurdity of it all wash over me. My seat hadn't been stolen. My victory hadn't been ruined. Instead, I had front row access to the most bizarre pre-flight showdown imaginable. REO. Somewhere in the cockpit, the man who had tried to pull rank on me was now preparing to take us into the sky. And as strange as it sounded, the thought made me laugh. I had won my small battle for seat 1A, but in the bigger picture, he had still gotten the last word because he was the one with his hands on the controls. I raised my glass higher, chuckling under my breath. Here's to the HOA president, and to one flight I'll never forget.